Welcome back to Rebel Reviews, where I will give you my newest review on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Before we get started, please press that like button, click subscribe, and make sure you turn your notifications on so you don't miss any and all new content. And this is your regular scheduled spoiler warning. You have been told, you have been warned. Please stop watching this now if you do not want to be spoiled during your viewing of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. But if you don't care, please stay. But you've been warned. I will not be held responsible. So let's get started off with my general reaction. I actually just got home from watching the film, and my first thought after watching it was that I'd still love James Mangold. I can see how a lot of people don't like this film, based on what James Mangold does to characters, especially when he got a hold of Wolverine and Logan towards the end. And I think Logan is a great film. But this film actually breaks down Indiana Jones a lot and makes him more human, a lot different than our previous four installments of Indiana Jones. But even with that, I think it comes together nicely at the end. And that's what Indiana Jones is. He's old. He's human now. He's not got all the energy that he had in previous films. And some may say, why even make this film if we can't do that? But even so, even after watching it, I'm a big fan of James Mangold and what he did with this film. So I'm loving it. So let's go ahead and get started with the 5 things that I really liked about it. Number one, the thing that I liked most about the movie was just the overall story. They did a really good job of taking us to 2 different time periods, or even 3. Well, with the beginning of the film, we see a de-aged Indiana Jones. He is stuck with the Nazis yet again, as he is trying to also locate the spear that once pierced Christ that has the blood on it. And then the Nazis are also taking the relics as they have been doing in previous films that we know of. And from that point forward, Indiana gets on a train to try to save his buddy. He's trying to follow the Nazis, a pretty cool train sequence. And when he gets to the spear, he realizes that it is a fake. It's a replica. So it kind of defeats the whole start of the film of the thing we're looking for is not real. And that diverts the story a little bit, or fully, to the next thing because the new villain, Mads Mikkelsen, pulls out one half of the Archimedes dial, and there's archetypal blah blah blah. I don't know how to say it, but it's the Archimedes dial that Archimedes made thousands of years ago, and it is said that if you connect the pieces, then you can use it to time travel. Basically, we find out. So Mads Mikkelsen character wants to give that to Adolf Hitler to make up for not having the spear. While that is happening on the train, and both Indy and Mikkelsen's character figures that out, Indy comes across the dial. He takes it. The long running chase scene on the train, and by the end of it, Indy ends up with the dial, and we'll find out a little bit more later. The buddy that he's with as well has it. And then we no longer see our de-aged Indiana Jones. We then jump to 1969, I believe it is, and it is currently Moon Day. And this is the part where I talk about that I said in the intro where Indy gets broken down a little bit. We see him old. He's like shirtless in a chair, and he's grumpy with the kids who listen to music or whatever. But like this movie really does break down like Indy and how time has passed him by. And the Moon Day I think is important to the story because it's a good parallel as we are using this relic to travel back in time, or possible to change time. And then obviously we know Indy lives in the past. He's still wearing his wedding ring even after losing Marion and his son. So again, another thing that he wants to live in the past, and he knows his time has just passed him by. And then here is everyone celebrating Moon Day, which is kind of like this celebration of the new frontier, space, the future, uncharted territory on a moon where there's really no, I guess, actual relics. But then here is Indy, his whole life has been spent his time trying to find the past over here on Earth. So it's a really good parallel that time is moving forward while he's not really agreeing with it or doesn't want to, and neither does his counterpart, the villain, Mads Mikkelsen, which is really good. It connects both of them together with the same similarity as he's, like I said, he's a Nazi, and still a Nazi, secretively, I guess. But then he wants to go back in time and change the ways because history for some worked out well, history for others didn't. And obviously for the Nazis after World War II didn't work out so well, and he believes that he can make a difference with the mistakes that Adolf Hitler made. So it's a pretty good story to jump us off with. There's a nice intertwined in it. We find Indiana has a goddaughter played by Phoebe Bridges, something like that. I might have messed it up, something like that. But yeah, so they play a good little father kind of daughter duo, which brings me back to like things of the Last Crusade, which is a father son type movie with Sean Connery obviously playing the father of Indy. So it's a good dynamic to have that kind of go on. And then Crimson of the Kingdom Skull also had the father son thing too, but this is a little different. Um, and she's really good in it. I like how she's intertwined into the story. How she's not just one simple character. You find out she's got a little dark side to her as well. So overall, I like the story. It was great. I think it did a really good job, start to finish. Nothing too wonky or crazy. I think it was just a breath of fresh air compared to the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I just really was down on. So overall, the story was my number one thing that I liked. My number two is Harrison Ford. He is still fantastic on the big screen as always, even after the long wait after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He is still killing it, even as old as he is. There's a part of the movie, the film, as I said, where they de-aged Harrison Ford. Parts of it's a little wonky. They do a lot of close-ups. It's pretty bold. When he moves his head really fast, you can see how it's really kind of messy a little bit. But overall, it's not too bad. But beyond him being de-aged, when we get to him how he is in actual life, not being computer generated. He's great. He does all the right things. He's charismatic. He's got the right facial expressions for the character. All the things that he does. He's Harrison Ford's one of the best of all time. So I'm so glad that we got him back in this for one final round. So Harrison Ford is definitely number two. If you're a big fan of him, you're definitely going to love him again in this film. Number three, the actual action in the film is really, really good for me. There's like a 20-minute chase scene in the middle of the movie where there's like 4 or 5 groups actually chasing each other, all one after the next. The opening sequence with the train's really good. The action overall, I mean, there's a lot of chase scenes. There's one through a parade. I enjoyed every bit of them, and I've seen a lot of, if you know, some Star Wars stuff. There's been some really bad chase scenes in Star Wars here recently. But in Indiana Jones, they keep it going. So the chase scenes are really good. But my favorite action scene in the film is when the granddaughter, I'm going to forget, Wombat, she's gotten the dial or the half of the dial, and she's taking it to the auction. And then Indy shows up, and then Mads Mikkelsen character shows up. I'm not saying his name because I don't know if I can say it right. And then there's a whole bunch of people there who, it's like a black market auction, so they're all kind of violent and vile people with weapons and guns, and it's just really good banter back and forth between the groups. The action between them is really good. They're taking shots at each other with actual bullets and then with actual words. So that's probably my favorite scene in the movie is the auction that kind of sets up that big chase scene. So the action is really good. So that's my number 3 of the film. Number 4, and this is kind of a weird one I could do, but I'm going to say like some emotional parts of the film, some good or bad. One thing that was very emotional, and usually when you watch an Indiana Jones film, you're not really getting too emotional, I don't think, but there's a scene where, again, he's lost Marion through divorce, where they're being separated because we find out that his son, Junior, has died in the war, and there's a scene on the boat when asked what he could do if he could go back and change time, he says that he would go back and tell his son not to join the war because he would die. And he explains all these things. You would die, and your mom and I would separate, and those types of things. And like that's not an Indiana Jones thing to hit that kind of emotional spot, for me at least, in any of the previous films. So they kind of went there on that. And I like feeling emotions in a film, so that was a pretty good scene, feeling that emotion there. And again, like I said, this breaks down Indy a little bit. You see him more vulnerable than we've seen him before. So that was a nice little scene that we got there. So emotion there. And then something that made me really happy. Obviously, the movie's fun and joyful, but I really love the original films because of how Indy, he's always got a guy that's somewhere. And then in this film, we get to see a familiar face come back that we didn't see in the last film, and that is Sala. So when I had a very emotional moment with Indy having his little speech about what he would do to change the life of his son or his own as well. Seeing Sala on the screen again, which just brought so much joy, just nostalgia, seeing him back as well. And that's what this movie really is. Any of these Indiana Jones films is to do a lot of nostalgia. So seeing Sala back on the screen, not just for a couple little seconds, but he was on there for a couple scenes, and finding out that his family has come to America. It's kind of like someone when you watch them, you kind of care for these people. And now to see him now with the family in America and then they're safe, it was just a really cool, joyful moment, like a win for all of us, and especially for me to see that happening throughout what's going on in this film. So so the emotion of joy and then also the emotion of some sentimental stuff was also a highlight for me. And my number 5, which is a shock to me that it even happened. So, and this was my big gripe with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, is like the end came with the Crystal Skulls, and we had a little sequence with the alien, but like we never saw like what was the whole point. Like knowledge is power. Like I just felt like it was very unlived. Where in the previous Indiana Jones films, like you actually get to see the thing that they're going for, how it works, like the Grail, the stones that he has to go get. Like you get to actually see the purpose of those items and Does it work? Does it not work? The whole film, as we're talking about time travel, I'm like, there's no way they're actually gonna do time travel, right? It's not gonna work. The bad guy's gonna mess something up. He's just gonna die. It's not gonna happen. No, they actually traveled in time and went back to BC 200, where Archimedes was at first developing this dial. And like I said, Mickelson was trying to get back to 1939 to make up for the issues, and fix what Adolf did and kind of take over. And they messed up some plot points or on the map because of the continental drift Archimedes didn't know about yet. And they actually go through time. I'm like still shocked that they actually did it. They went through time. And I think you normally would say this is weird, whatever, but we've seen weird stuff in Indiana Jones. We saw the knight who had passed and was still 700 years old, and he drank from the grail and it healed his father. And then you got the one guy ripping hearts out. Like, it's weird stuff. Like, it's it's not all of it's really grounded in actually being real. This stuff that is believed in or is actually happening. So the fact that they actually did it, I was kind of shocked that they did it, and it was a pretty cool sequence. I think it might be actually the highlight of the film, like the whole part. Um, I can't remember his name, but his Mickelson's like right hand man. They're flying and they realize they made a mistake. They went to the wrong place, and he is just going berserk. Like, he's shooting these dudes on ships with like a pistol, and then he pulls out like the machine gun, and he's just trying to shoot everybody. Like, he's just going nuts. So I'm just laughing during that part. And then Mickelson realizes he made a mistake, and he's just stressing in the back of the plane. And Indy and the goddaughter Wombat, they're trying to figure out how to escape and get through, and it's just chaos. And then these Romans who are attacking Archimedes, they don't know what's going on. They're calling the planes dragons. Like, it's just chaos. And then there's a little boy who hijacked the plane, Teddy, and then he made it through the portal in time. So he's flying around. It was chaos but fun. Like, I really enjoyed it. I didn't think they would do it. I guess how some people might not like it, but I really enjoyed that they actually did the going through time thing. So that's definitely my number 5. It really closed up the film really nice. Like, we went through all this stuff for this dial, and actually to see it work, like it really worked, was something fun to do. Because normally I think most people, they wouldn't go that route, but they did it. They went back in time. Indiana Jones time traveled. It was nuts, but I loved it. All right, so we did the 5 things that I liked. Let's go through the 5 things that I did not like. Number 1, I did not uh, particularly like. There was like another henchman type dude who just seemed like he was 8 foot tall. Uh, I think he was there for comedic effect as well, like muscle, but he just stuck out like a sore thumb. I was not a huge fan of him being in the film. I just felt it was unnecessary. You could just had a regular henchman. I don't know. It was just weird. And I think, Indy's supposed to be kind of a little funny, or whatever, but I just think it was a little weird. I was not a big fan of him. And it's not a big deal breaker or anything, but I was not a fan of this big type henchman that they had. Number 2, there was also another character, which was, I guess, the previous fiance of Wombat, who was a part of that big chase scene in the middle of the film, and he just didn't fit either for me. He was weird. He was acting psychotic but weak at the same time. Like, I don't know. It was just very weird. It didn't fit her character. I think to have him in the film, it could have just been anybody. It didn't have to be. I don't even know why they even went that route to make it a fiance. I think it was just a very pointless part of the film. And I just didn't like the direction of that character. It just didn't fit with what was going on. So I get another knock was that guy. So number 2 would be the fiance. Number 3, and I don't know if this is a valid complaint or not, but I feel like we're used to more Indiana doing more type of running through temples and stuff like that, trying to find the treasure. And the first piece that they got was just in the boat at the bottom of the water with like this eel sequence where they're being attacked by eels. I don't know. It just again, how much of this is actually believable, but it just seemed a little weird with him fighting all these eels at the bottom. That was like the major way to get the map for the dial, basically is what it was. And then, like I said, the action's great, but just I wanted more treasure stuff. At the end, we did get like the treasure where they go through the cave. It's pretty simple. Like, there originally wasn't nothing that we're used to that was death-defying. They just were around some methane gas, and they had to change the water to make it go down. Like, I would have preferred some more, especially on Indy's last movie out. And that stuff's the simple stuff. You don't need any bad guys or nothing like that. You're just going through these different types of traps and stuff like that. So I would have liked a little bit more of those if they could have put some more of those in there. But again, that's just a little minor complaint. So that's my number 3. Number 4, and I am conflicted with this one because I am a fan of how Mangold breaks down Indy and He's vulnerable in this film because he's lost his family, you know. But at the end, that final sequence, he wants to, after they've beat the Nazis there, some Romans get taken out. They meet Archimedes, and it's like such an achievement. Like Indy's just so thrilled to do it, but he's been shot and he's dying, and he just wants to stay. Um, I don't know. It's just weird. It's very like, and I try to compare it to Logan because that was like the last thing Mangold did, and like Logan fulfills his promise. He saves the girl. He dies. He can't do anymore. He physically can't do anymore. So like that's not on him. He can't. But Indy can. He has an option. He's got a way out. He can go home. He can be taken out and back into his regular time and get healed, whatever. And he's still choosing to stay. And I kind of get it because he's lost his family. But like the whole point of having Wombat there is kind of like for me was like his connection to someone else, and like she's kind of doing the things as she's on this journey with him together. And I kind of felt like by the end of that he would have been on board with that and would have felt comfortable going home. So I don't like that it went too far in the fact like I don't want to go home, Indy. Like, dude, go home. You have a person here. You went back in time. Yes, and it happens to all of us. So I'm young still, but even for someone like Harrison Ford, an older person who's at the end of his film or his franchise, this film with the franchise, like I feel like maybe there was some disconnect, like maybe this is what they wanted, but I feel like you would say like, hey, like my time hasn't been wasted. There's still more to be done. Even though I don't have the energy or the skills that I once had, you still have life left and still stuff to live for. And I feel like he was just giving up there at the end. So I wasn't a big fan of that per se. But it does come around. He does go home. It just took a punch to the face. Like and maybe that was the joke that they wanted. He was never going to intend to stay. But I just would have rather on board have Indy like, hey, I've done this. Let's go back home. Even if I don't get Marion back, I still have more that can be done because as a parallels to real life, like we have things that are going to happen to us that we don't always have full control over, and we should never give up. And Indiana Jones is someone I would think would never give up. So that part just rubbed me wrong, but it does work out in the end. It's just a little weird that it went that even deeper for breaking him down. But so that's my number four was that decision to do that at the end. And number five, and this one's a little questionable because I've seen some back and forth reports on it. This is supposed to be John Williams's last work on a film. Now, again, this isn't a knock on the film, so I'm kind of cheating here. But if this is his last work, he will be greatly missed. And if it is not his last work, I will be greatly pleased to have John Williams back for another film. So I don't know if he's retiring or he's not retiring. Um, but I do know when this movie came out, I was on board, like jumping in, like, oh, obviously everyone has to see this and pay respect, basically, to John Williams as well as this is his last hurrah, as well as Harrison Ford's last hurrah as Indiana Jones, which I'm cool with that part, because I think he's done doing these types of things. Well, he's not done doing the action stuff. He's going to be Red Hulk. After the unfortunate passing of William Hurt in the MCU, he'll be playing Thunderbolt Ross. But this is the end for also as John Williams if he does end up retiring. So salute to him and Harrison Ford for this. And again, it's a little cheat here. It's not really a fifth thing I complain about, but it's something I'm not happy about losing John Williams if that's the case. But may he enjoy his retirement because he's given us all enough content to enjoy for the rest of our time and all of eternity. And I guess if another dial is created, we could go back in time to get more. And before we get out of here, I'm going to do something a little special since this is the end of the Indiana Jones franchise, since we shouldn't get any more. And if they do more Indiana Jones, please don't. Just do something different. The Indiana Jones thing is over. If you want to bring Wombat back, just do something different. Just don't call it Indiana Jones. But since before we get out of here, I want to do something special since all five films are complete. I'm going to give you my top five Indiana Jones films, starting with number five. So number five, we're going to go with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think it's obviously the worst one. I still watch it. It still has some fun parts to it, but Cate Blanchett, I'm not a big fan of in that film. I don't think the treasure hunting and the adventure really works well at the end. I feel like we were slighted. We didn't get much out of it, other than just a cool crystal skull sequence of heads hitting each other. So that's my number five. I think that's the weakest one. This is where we get shaken up. So number four, you might think it'll be the Dial of Destiny, but number four, I'm going to go with Temple of Doom. So I'm gonna go number four. I just rewatched all the films recently to prepare for this. It's a good film. I like it, but it's maybe it's recency bias. But Temple of Doom, I think I'd rather watch this one before just because of some of the added elements to it. So number four will be Temple of Doom, which brings me to number three. Like I just said, will be The Dial of Destiny. That's my number three. I'm definitely going to rewatch this film. There's a lot of things that I did like about it. And then number two, I love both 1 and 2. It's hard to pick one over the other. Like I think people know the obvious one, but I still think this one at my number 2 could be number 1, and that is The Last Crusade. What's not to love? Sean Connery playing his father. You have the iconic line at the end where we find out that Indiana's his name is actually Henry, and so he's being called Junior, and he says, "I like Indiana," and then Sean Connery goes, "We named the dog Indiana." So I just love that film. It's a great father-son film. If you had to do a ranking of top father-son films, The Last Crusade is definitely up there. And then obviously number 1 is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the very first Indiana Jones film. Great movie, awesome opening. Got Alfred Molina with some spiders on him. There's a lot of cool stuff. They're looking for the Ark of the Covenant, and then at the end you have the scene with all the little ghostly things, spirits flying around. That's just iconic. That's the first one. So that is my top 5 Indiana Jones films. So now that I give you my ranking, let's go ahead and give you the rating for this film, Dial of Destiny, my double RR chart here. How many am I going to give it? I think I'm going to go. I'm not going to do 0.5, so let me just go around. I would probably say 7.5, but let's just round it to 8. I'll give it 8 double R's. I liked it a lot. There was minor complaints with it, but overall, it's nonstop action for the most part. It's paced very well. I like the sentimental parts of the film. I do like how we get to see a vulnerable Indy. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10 for the Dial of Destiny, and those are our double R ratings for this film. So I hope you enjoyed that review. Before we get out of here, please press that like button if you haven't so far. Click subscribe, and again, turn those notifications on so you don't miss anything new. I'll be back with another review sometime soon. Rebel out.